are in the practice session.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think I'm a co-host. If you want to make me one, I can help out.
Okay. So we will now call the meeting of the Design Review Committee to order. Now that you can hear us in public. And if the clerk would call the roll.
Okay, sounds good. Committee member Baranek,
Here.
committee member Schmidt,
Here.
vice chairperson Funk,
Here.
and for the record, committee member Vanden Eyck and chairperson Newsom are excused absence for today.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Actually, Susan, Laura had mentioned to me that she would prefer that we actually do roll call instead of the all in favor. Is
Okay,
that okay with you?
please feel free to call the roll
Okay.
for that. That's good to
Sounds
know.
good.
Laura being our city clerk, and we will take her happily take her professional guidance on those points.
Great. Okay, so committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
vice chairperson Funk,
Yes.
committee member Baranek,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now it's the time in our agenda that the committee receives public comment. This is a chance for anyone participating to bring up an issue that is not on the agenda for today. If you would like to make public comment, please use the raised hand function on Zoom. Or if you're, I don't see any, do we have anybody calling in? I don't see that, but you may, if you wish to call in.
I don't believe that we have any attendees, including the applicant. So I don't know if Mariah has a way to reach out, and maybe we could give a couple minutes. I know maybe his phone wasn't working. So
Okay, yeah, it would be helpful to have the applicant on. So
Him actually. I see
Thanks,
one.
So it looks like the applicant just came on. So we'll start the presentation as normal, and then give him a chance to speak after the end of the presentation when we open that up, just so he's aware of what's going on.
Okay, so we're right now in the agenda, we're in the public comment section. So this is a chance for people to make comments on issues that are not on the agenda for today, but are under the jurisdiction of this committee. So you do that on the telephone, it's *9, right? And then if you're on Zoom, you reach down there under participants and use the raised hand function to raise an electronic hand. Seeing none, I will close public comment for the moment. Since, in keeping with the practice that we have at City Council, since that's generally a 30-minute period maximum, we will, if we're still meeting in 30 minutes, we will keep that open, until 2:34 if people come in late and wish to comment something. Okay, moving right along, we will move to the consent calendar, which is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded, but please call the roll.
Okay, committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
committee member Baranek,
Yes.
vice chairperson Funk,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
Okay, now that we've taken care of our housekeeping, I'm going to turn this over to our capable staff to present the design and neighborhood compatibility review of a fence at 8850 El Centro Road.
Okay. Here. There we go. All right, thank you. So yes, this is for design review of a residential fence, again at 8850 El Centro Road. The property is located behind the commercial center where Guest House Grill is. That commercial center faces El Camino, and this house is on El Centro Road along the backside there. It's in the RSFX zoning district, so it's a single family zoning district, and the property is about 0.68 acres. So here are some photos of the existing site. the proposal is going to be for a new fence along the front here. You can see that bottom fence there is what appears to be a new fence that's about 6 feet tall right now. So the new fence would, the proposed fence would connect up to that fence. And then on the opposite side, there is a 6 foot tall chain link fence right now. I think I'm missing. Oh, okay. We're a little out of order, but that's okay. So again, the fence is being proposed along the front property line. So these are these pictures are showing approximately where that fence will be located on the property. The project being proposed is an exception to the front setback fencing requirement to allow the installation of a 6 foot tall fence. This would be a black metal picket looking fence. And this would include a gate that slides across the driveway so it wouldn't open up. It would be a sliding gate. So the reason this is coming before the design review committee is because the municipal code limits fencing within the front setback of the RSFX zone to a maximum of 4 feet tall. Just a reminder, the front setback in this zoning district is 25 feet. So in order to be compliant, any fence within that first 25 feet would have to be no taller than 4 feet. However, the code also states that the design review committee can grant an exception to allow up to 6 feet tall as long as it's consistent with the neighborhood character and doesn't impair sight distance for vehicular traffic as reviewed by the city engineer. So just to clarify, this decision is being made by the design review committee. It's not moving on to planning commission unless you were to forward it. I think that's an option, but otherwise it's just the design review committee making the decision on whether this is going to be approved or not. So here's an example of the design that the applicant provided. Again, you can see it's kind of a metal rod looking fence with a wrought iron appearance. The primary reason for the fence is the applicant is concerned about safety being close to a commercial center. There have been some incidences and that's the reason for his request. There's some specific examples outlined in, I think it's Exhibit B of your staff report in the applicant's letter, but ultimately the request is to prevent any unwanted guests on the property. So here's a bit of a clearer picture of where the fence is to be located. You can see it's right along the front property line. There's actually a drainage swale in this area here, and then the asphalt is where the mouse is pointing. So there's about a 15 to 20 foot setback from just the property line to that existing asphalt right now. So while the fence would be right along the property line, it wouldn't necessarily be right along the asphalt unless at some point, I don't know, the asphalt would get wider, although there's a drainage there. So it's probably always going to be set back from the road area. So this gives you a little bit of a clearer picture of what's on the ground now. So you can see there's an existing wooden fence there, and the applicant is proposing to replace that with this new fence. So we did receive some comments that maybe the metal fence was not desirable from the neighbors. So we just wanted to throw out some alternative options that still might provide the level of safety that the applicant is looking for, but might be a little bit of a different appearance in the neighborhood. So these are just some examples. We haven't analyzed, a cost difference or, the building or anything like that. So that would be something that the applicant would need to consider. I know he's gotten a cost estimate for the fence he's proposing. So if it were to change, that could change his decision based on the budget. So the discussion items that we want to talk to the design review committee about are the actual design of the fence and then the compatibility of the fence within the neighborhood. We do have a couple of conditions if the design review committee is going to approve the fence. These are just that any gates be sliding and shall not swing into the public right of way. The fence needs to be similar to whatever is approved by the design review committee right now. That is being proposed as that metal picket fence. And then new fences shall meet the site distance requirements as approved by the city engineer. And just to note that Nick DeBar has looked at the fence location and he's not concerned about site distance from the right of way based on its distance from the right of way and its location kind of on a curve. So that has been analyzed and approved by the city engineer, the location. So without anything else, staff is available for questions.
Okay, and I should circle back. I didn't ask for ex parte and should have done so at the outset of this. Anybody have ex parte to disclose?
No ex parte.
None for me as well.
My only ex parte is that I did do a drive-by of the site, including a getting out and walking along the back side of the property to understand the way that property is situated relative to the shopping center, because I was only familiar with the front side of the shopping center and had not walked along in the parking lot in the back.
I did as well drive by. I was thinking I didn't have any ex parte communications, but I did drive by El Centro and through that back parking lot as well.
Okay. Very good, thank you. So questions, Dennis, Emily?
Yeah, I do, please.
Mhm.
There were alternatives that were presented. Those all seem to be 6 foot in height. Would any of these alternatives have to also have the same exception request?
Yes, any fence over 4 feet is required to be approved by the design review committee.
Does that apply to hedges? If I wanted to plant Queen Anne roses along this frontage and have thorny stickers for people to have to fight through, and they went to, let's say, 8 foot in height, would they also, be required to be cut down to 4 feet?
Yes, so that would be the code, the title of the code is fencing and screening. And so that would count as screening and it's required to follow the same rules. And I do also just want to add, we have talked to the applicant for a while about this project and he had originally proposed a chain link fencing and staff wasn't comfortable with that. And so that's how he got to this black wrought iron looking fence.
We have a requirement about the gate sliding versus opening into the right of way. Does emergency services have any requirements for access? Fire department, do they want a Knox box? Do they want something so they can open up the gate versus having to get it out of a truck and slide it open to get into the property?
Man, what's the standard for that, Kelly? I think that they require a Knox box, right?
They usually do, sometimes not just for those single family properties, but they'll look at that at building permit and make any requirements at that time.
Or do we have to add a condition? Or
No, that's just their standard code requirement. So when it comes in for permit.
okay. One of the photographs, you showed a wooden fence along the side yard.
Yeah.
Can we see that, please?
Yeah,
Can you see
that
it?
Now, within that picture, isn't part of that fence within the front setback?
It is. So technically, that fence is non-conforming to the standard as it is. I'm honestly not 100% sure who built the fence. Maybe the applicant can clarify. But the first 25 feet of that fence should be no taller than 4 feet. So
And then tapering up or going after 25, then going up. Okay. And then you said that Nick had no concerns about sight distance along the road. I noted that the properties on a dead end road. I too had visited the site, and I'll note, I forget the name of the street, but on the corner leading into this neighborhood, there is a fence that's higher than 4 feet, is there not?
There might be, I'm not sure, I didn't notice that.
Around the perimeter of a large parcel, I'm gonna say on the northwest corner. And I don't know if that's single family zoning or what type of residential zoning that parcel may be. But it does front on El Centro, but on the opposite, on the other side of the cross street. Anyhow, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Emily, any questions?
I do. I just wanted to ask staff about the intent of the code with regard to fencing and screening in the setback. Is it accurate to say that that's specifically regarding visibility and like view shed for drivers and emergency personnel?
So that's, I don't know, Kelly, if you have more background knowledge, but
Yeah, I think in general, there are sight distance issues when you get a lot of larger fences, especially if they're opaque in nature. But I do also think there are some neighborhood character concerns when we start having taller fences. I think some of that is, the walled off appearance that a solid fence can give. I know that we already wrote exceptions into our code a few years ago to allow larger properties to have the 5-foot fence as long as a percentage of it was transparent. And so there is a recognition in our community that on, the larger, more rural area parcels, a transparent, taller fence to allow horses and animals and things like that is still in keeping with the character of those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I too was curious about that. I noted that wooden fence that Dennis mentioned. That's in the picture. So this proposed fence would come up to that, join that fence?
yes, that's my understanding, that the fence would connect. The applicant could probably confirm that, but that's my understanding.
And I'm curious, and this may be a question that the applicant will have to address, but I'm curious if you understand what the security purpose for the fence at the front of the property, because it seems that the area, that a fence along the front of the property protects the property from egress, unwanted egress from El Centro. But it seems like the flows that are at risk are behind the property, where there's like this little weird alley type drainage area that's behind that parking lot. And I can see that would get some traffic. And so the risk would be people coming from that, those kinds of areas, or the back parking lot, or in areas that are not as visible there, to the back of the property. And it is less clear to me how preventing entrance from El Centro would materially contribute to the security of the property, and that. So maybe if you know the answer, or maybe the applicant can address that.
Yeah, I think it's just generally trying to keep unwanted visitors off the entire property. I seem to remember, I can't remember, we've talked about this for so long, but I think the owner also has large dogs that they maybe want to be able to be in the front yard, but I'll let the owner speak to the exact situation and the reasons for wanting this fence.
Okay, and where people have large dogs that they are wanting to accommodate with this kind of thing, what kind of precedent of height of the fence? I can see that 4 feet might not be enough. Do you need to go up to 6?
Yeah, so to be honest, I've been here for almost 4 years and I've never seen anyone actually ask for a taller fence. A lot of times people just do them. We actually recently did a social media post a couple months ago because we were just noticing a lot of these taller fences popping up. But unfortunately, in some cases, they become code enforcement cases, and it's hard to, have someone take down a fence that they spent thousands of dollars on.
Right.
So people have done them, you'll see them around town, but to my knowledge, I don't think any of them have probably been properly permitted.
Yeah, and then again, going back to our larger lot fencing standard, for animals, I believe that we went up to 5 feet, and Mariah can correct me if I'm wrong, because she looks at that code section more than I do. But we did do a 5-foot opaque fence for those animal type properties.
Yeah, I actually think now that you're saying that, Kelly, for the larger properties, I think maybe it's in maybe just our RS zone, but they can have, if they have a fully transparent fence like that cattle fencing, it can actually be up to 7 feet tall. But again, those are in the larger zoning districts, and it can only be that cattle type ag fencing.
Okay, thank you. Dennis, go ahead.
Yeah, two things. I know of very specifically a situation where my neighbor built a higher fence, maybe 5 to 6 feet along his frontage of his property. And he did it for privacy reasons, more from, I live on Santa Rosa Road, and where I live, there's a long right turn. And so he was doing it for more privacy from vehicles. But it did create a situation where sight distance was very poor, and people couldn't see past the turn. And sometimes that's a good thing because people drive slower because they can't see. And sometimes when you make it a longer sight vision, they drive faster. Nonetheless, the city, this is going to be a long time ago, maybe 20, 25 years ago, came by and told him he needed to cut that fence down. And that's what he ended up doing. He ended up then, as counter to that, planted oleanders on the inside of the fence and created a visual blockage that way. I can sometimes be a contrarian. And so if I was to want to be a real jerk about things, could I build a 4-foot high or less razor wire fence along the frontage? As long as I was less than 4 feet, could I do that?
I think that Mariah maybe knows the code, but I believe that we prohibit razor wire fencing.
Could I build some type of fence that was make it very difficult for people to go over?
I suppose you could do like a picket fence, but yeah, Kelly is right. The barbed wire or razor wire is not permitted. So you could make it pokey, but no, nothing significant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if that exhausts committee questions, let's, I would look for to recognize the applicant, and perhaps the applicant can both talk in context about the purposes of the fence, but also address the specific questions that were raised with regard to the provenance of the wooden fence that's on the roughly southeast of the property, and also the security aims to be, that are resulting in this particular fence design. Let's see, is the applicant on?
Jim, if you are on, go ahead and press *9 on your phone, and that will raise your hand, and then we'll let you speak. Oh, there we go. And then I'm gonna, or Kelly's allowing you to speak, and then I think you press *6 to unmute yourself.
Is it?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hear
Thank you. Please give us your name for the record.
James Mullen.
Thank you. Go ahead, you're on.
Yeah, do you guys have a question for me?
Yes, we had specifically asked, there were specifically two questions that came up from the committee, and that was, who built the solid wooden fence that we now see on screen in the site photos, which is roughly on the side, something like southeast side between you and the neighbor there, on the garage side of the
Was
property.
it lateral fence? The side fence?
The side fence, yes. That was one of the
Yeah, I
questions.
did that. I did that.
Okay, and then the other question, what was regard to the security objectives, given that from a at least my perspective, looking at the property, we could see security risks around the back side of the property. And so the extent to which a fence
What's on the
along
back?
the security risks.
What's on the back side of the property?
On the back side of the property is the parking lot of the shopping center, and then a little sort of drainage area that's back there that is behind the.
Well, that's a side fence, is a chain link fence already there.
Right, that part's fenced. And so the question was, to what extent is the security improved by blocking egress from the El Centro Road property, when the risks visually look to be more on the backside?
Well, for one instance, just recently I had someone with a 5-gallon gas can walking up onto my neighbor's property, trying to attempt to steal gas out of their cars. So that's one thing that just recently happened.
And
The
that
other
was,
instance was someone on the parking lot side was in the bushes at 8 o'clock at night, so it was dark. And I said, "What are you doing in the bushes?" And he said, "Well, I'm running." And we had a conversation. Then he came up onto El Centro, and he was getting ready to come up my driveway into the door of my house. So those two situations would have kept someone off my property. Both of those incidents, I called the police department.
okay, thank you for that
Well, that-
clarification. Anything?
Yeah,
is-
because the person was challenging me while I was asking him what was he doing in the bushes at nighttime, and it escalated all the way up to my house.
Sorry about that. Is there anything else that you would like the committee to know about your desire to have this fence and about your desire to have this particular design of fence?
Oh, well,
And
originally I was
height.
going to do the chain link, but then I was told that aesthetically wasn't going to be pleasing, so I switched it to the other one. Once the front is done, then the whole yard will be completely fenced off, because there's a chain link in the back, and then there's cedar fence on one part of the back and the east side.
And
So then
Susan,
it'll be completely fenced off.
Susan, I did just want to note that the applicant was having trouble logging on, and so I'm not sure that he was actually present for the presentation. And so I do not know if he heard, and certainly didn't see if he's not on the computer, but heard that there were maybe some other alternative designs that might be an option that the committee might discuss. So I don't know if you
Yeah,
want to revisit that a
letters
little
I
bit,
got.
or-
Yeah, the letters I got didn't have a meeting ID number, so I called the city hall, and then finally someone called me back with it.
Okay. And are you, Mr. Mullen, are you now where you can log on to this? So do you have a visual connection also, or are you strictly by telephone?
No, I can only use the telephone where I'm at right now.
Okay. Fair enough. So
Was there an issue with the design of the fence?
yeah, so let's send. I am being very generous. Ordinarily in public comment, we try to keep that not to be a two-way street. But given Kelly's alert that you probably didn't see that portion of the of the discussion, if Mariah or Kelly, if you could go back and recap two things. One is the question with regard to whether or not the wooden fence that the applicant has installed between his property and the neighboring property that goes into the front setback area, the extent to which that is consistent with code or not. And then the other question is, could you describe visually the images that staff provided of other ways to achieve that kind of fencing, the fencing requirement that might not be the metal spiked approach?
I'm sorry, Susan, you cut out for a second. Were you wanting me to explain those things?
Yes.
Okay.
Those should come from that. Those explanations should come from staff. So either you can do that or Kelly.
Does the applicant have a copy of the staff report?
Yeah, so
Right.
I'll just give you a brief rundown. I think that Jim, you did receive the staff report. Yeah, certainly. It cut out and all I heard was like, these are the 2 points, and I was confused, but so anyway, yeah, Jim, one of the things that we were talking about is the fence that it looks like you probably recently built there, that wood fence that we were mentioning before. Technically, the first 25 feet of that fence is supposed to be no taller than 4 feet. So that fence is actually a little bit too tall. So so that can maybe be part of your request to leave that at that 6 foot height. So just clarifying that. Okay. Well. So
Oh, no,
yeah,
no,
and
no,
then
there's a height requirement. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask Mariah to finish, and then Mr. Mullen, and then I'll recognize you again to continue your comments.
yeah, so technically any fence within the first 25 feet, no taller than 4 feet tall. So that is the reason that fence is too tall right now. I probably am not going to be great at describing these visually, but we did provide some pictures for the design review committee of fence alternatives that are still 6 feet tall if they want to approve the height exception. But if there's specific concerns about the appearance of your fence with the black metal poles, we're just proposing some alternatives. And so to describe the 3 pictures that we're looking at on the PowerPoint, the top one here is, it's a 6 foot tall fence. It's got metal posts that are 6 feet tall, 2 poles going across the top, and then 1 through the middle. And then it's got kind of that cattle fencing that has, it's a metal rectangular fencing. So it still provides kind of that level of security, but it's maybe a little bit more transparent than the one that you're proposing. The second fence that we're looking at is similar. It has that cattle fencing, but it's with wood poles and wooden beams that go across it. So it's, again, a little bit more transparent. And then the last one is, again, it's kind of a pipe fence with the metal cattle fencing, and it provides the height, but more transparency. So it doesn't have the spikes at the top, but it does provide the height and allows a little bit more visibility into the property. So I hope I painted a little bit of a clear picture.
Thanks. To do those kinds of descriptions is challenging. Mr. Mullen, would you like to comment on those options?
It'd be pretty hard to.
Yeah. Now that we've clarified those issues. Yeah.
So can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, well, I provided a picture of what I was, first I was into the chain link, then I went to the other design, and now that design is not acceptable either?
That's,
I'm a bit confused.
okay, we let us come back to that then. Let's come back to this question after we've heard the rest of public comment and come back to discussion by the committee. And then we may have additional questions for the applicant at that time. Fair enough?
Okay.
I
Okay.
particularly think that
And Dennis, excuse me, we need to finish the rest of public comment
I'm sorry.
before we move to committee discussion. So at this point, I want to reach out and see, I see we do have some others on the line. And let's see, the number ending in 4164, I believe, is the applicant. Is there anyone else who is on the line who would like to speak? And you indicate that by pressing *9 on your telephone or using the raised hand function in Zoom. Okay, let's bring on the caller with 2675 at the end as the last 4 digits of the phone number.
And I believe if you push *6, that will unmute you on the phone.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Janet, and I did send an email on the issue. I was late getting that in, not understanding the process, so I'm hoping that I can read that to you and get my issues raised.
Sure, that would be fine.
I would like to express my strong opposition to allowing a 6-foot fence in the setback of the property mentioned. The current design plan states the fence should be within the setback no more than 4 foot, which is more than ample to draw boundaries. I concur with the current design plan of fences within the front setback to be no more than 4 foot tall. If the board allows a 6-foot fence in this area, I believe it to be a complete eyesore to those that live and drive on the street. Blocking this home from its current view will move our quiet little street into an industrialized anarchy. Making this kind of change in our residential neighborhood will blemish the view and simplicity of our neighborhood. As a resident of El Centro Road, I beg you not to allow this fence being 6 foot tall. It will be the biggest monstrosity in the neighborhood and is not acceptable to myself, my husband, my children, my grandchildren, and other neighbors. I hope you consider the feelings of those of us who will have to live with this disgrace and vote against this horrid encroachment to our neighborhood.
Thank you for your
I've lived there for over 30 years. I have not had issues. The times are changing. Issues arise, but the applicant has only raised a concern for 2 issues, and one of which he asked the person what they were doing there, and while having a conversation with the person went onto his property. Well, if I was having a conversation with a person, I would probably be walking onto their property as well. So I've said my piece. I hope this goes well for him and the board, but I do not believe this is a good thing.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else on the, I see a couple of other names on here. Anybody else that wants to comment? Seeing none, hearing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the committee for discussion. Go ahead, Dennis.
I have 2 comments, please. Of the alternatives that we have been presented, I actually think that the fence that Mr. Mullins is proposing is more aesthetically pleasing than these 3 fences. The one made of wood, wood fences do deteriorate quickly and fall apart, where the other are very, there's a wire mesh with metal piping holding it on to holding it. And I just don't think that that is more aesthetically pleasing than what's being proposed. My other question is more of one that deals with the mechanics of our group. And I'll convey a message that something, not a message, but I'll convey a situation that occurred on the Planning Commission a while back, where there were not a majority of the members of the Planning Commission available. And the city attorney had made comment that in this particular case, there would have been a vote of 3-2 in favor of a project. And the city attorney commented that the majority that needed to be to approve a project had to be a majority of the full commission. So in this case, there needed to be at least 4 votes in favor versus 3 votes in favor. And so I'm wondering, with only 3 members of the design review committee, if there was to be a split vote, what would be the result?
So I believe the fact that we do not have governing bylaws for the design review committee or the planning commission, that would set forth different standards for vote, that we would likely need a full vote to bring conclusion to the project. So if we weren't, go ahead, Susan.
So in other words, if it goes 3-0 in either direction today, then the matter is resolved. Otherwise, the action of this body today would be inconclusive and it would have to come back again.
That's correct. And I did just want to note as well that even if there is a resolution 3-0, any neighbor or applicant would have the opportunity to appeal that decision to Planning Commission if they wanted to at that time as well.
And Kelly, I'm sorry to cut you off, but Kelly, I don't know if you know, sometimes the lower level hearings, the hearing bodies can push it to the next higher hearing body. Would an opportunity be to push this to Planning Commission?
Yes, so I think if you were unable to receive a unanimous vote, you could either push that decision to Planning Commission, or you could bring it back to DRC when you had a more full quorum.
If the design review commission decides to push it to the Planning Commission, is that something different? If we make an affirmative vote of 3-0, and someone wanted to appeal that vote, is that an item that do appeals have to be paid for? Or can they just say, I'd like to have it appealed?
No, the appeal would have to be paid for. If this body chose to defer to Planning Commission, then that would not incur an additional cost.
And the fee for the appellant would be?
Go to Planning Commission, is it around $700, Mariah?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So that's a helpful clarification of where we are process-wise. Comments, committee discussion.
Dennis, were those all of your comments?
I'm sorry, Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if Dennis was done yet. Were those all of your comments?
Well, again, I'm pleased with the appearance of the fence that the applicant is proposing. I'm divided as to the height. I'm wondering if a 4-foot high fence with spikes on top would be prevent people from going, trying to climb over that fence. I think it would be more secure. The type of fence that he has be more secure than what's again presented. And then the issue of the side yard fence, whether if we approved, would we have to amend the motion to include the side yard fence if we do approve the fence along the front yard at 6 feet?
Yeah, so I would suggest including that if someone does want to make a motion to approve, I would include that approval as well, if that's something that you want to approve.
Thank you.
Okay, Emily,
Um,
go ahead.
Yeah,
Comments.
I agree with Dennis in that I think in that I like the style of fence proposed by the applicant for this neighborhood more than I do the staff recommendations, although I see their point with regard to its opacity overall. I just think, at least in my experience, the black metal fencing is in my opinion, a relatively attractive residential style fencing. Perhaps what the caller's concern is in regards to is perhaps the spikes along the top. And I know that there are 6-foot metal fencing options that do not include the spikes, which I think are also, you know, a good safety option. And I would also approve of. If perhaps the applicant would be amenable to changing the overall look of the black metal fence in exchange for approval for the 6-foot height and approval of the style of fence in that neighborhood, I think that might be a direction to go. I just think those spikes do kind of add a different, I don't know, personality, perhaps. And then I would also agree that we could, or that we should recommend modification of the existing cedar fence, at least the extent to which it extends into the setback, be modified to match this and or reduced in height. But yeah, those are my comments.
Yeah, and my thinking on this, I can see how, you know, the neighbor feels like this would contribute to more of an armed fortress feel into the neighborhood, and something that would be, you know, it would be easy for this to change, to affect the character, you know, of the neighborhood. I think that, but yet I also appreciate very much the applicant's desire to feel physical control over their property space and to feel safe inside some fencing that's more substantive than what the low barrier fencing right now is sort of decorative around front and not a functional barrier. So it seems to me that I'm thinking that there's is there a compelling need to have a 6 feet for the fence? And, you know, a 4-foot fence is a pretty major thing to jump. You know, I mean, yes, it can be scale, but you really know that you're scaling, so, you know, a fence in a big way, and somebody it would discourage any casual trespassers. They're probably much more at risk of people jumping over the back fence, even though that is 6 feet, because there's property above up in that area. Than somebody encountering this, you know, fence at the front of the property. So I'm wondering if there isn't a way to make this more compatible with the neighborhood and still achieve the homeowner's objectives with, you know, with this design in a 4-foot fence instead of a 6-foot fence, or even a 5-foot fence would be better than a 6-foot fence. The 6-foot is pretty intrusive in, you know, being along the front of the property. I also do think that we need to resolve something with regard to the wooden fence that's been installed out into the front area, because that solid fencing at 6 feet in height is both intrusive and visually blocking. So if you had a 4-foot fence with, the applicants prefer, with the wrought iron type style that wraps around and to handle the the side yard, and you take care and remove the non-compliance in that side yard fence. I'm wondering if that wouldn't meet the objectives for everybody involved. Dennis, Emily, do you have any thoughts on that?
I know that, these metal fencing panels come in a variety of heights. I think one of the reasons that these are so popular is that they're prefabricated and relatively affordable. I don't know if 5 feet's available. I know there's 3, I think there's 4. But again, my feeling is that the 6 foot would not be as obtrusive in the location proposed if perhaps the panel style installed did not include these spikes along the top. I think that it could be friendlier looking at 6 feet and be more appropriate for the neighborhood. If the applicant was open to going to 4 feet or 5 feet, depending on what his budget allows, I think I'd be open to that as well. I still don't think I would want to see the spikes.
Yeah, I get it on the spikes that makes me a little uncomfortable. I'm game to see spikes on a 4-foot fence, because to discourage somebody from vaulting over it, because the fence itself will be less intrusive. Dennis?
Again, I'm divided. I can understand both sides of the discussion very clearly. If we were to say hold the front yard requirement at 4 feet, then as the owner, I would have the fence with the spikes on top of it. I'm little procedurally, I'm concerned about not being able to final an action today, and would rather have the decision go forward to the planning commission by way of action by the design review committee, and then have the commission deal with the whole entire issue. So the vote would be final. What could happen today, let's just say the speculators that we could approve the exception, and then it gets appealed to the commission, and the commission turns it down, or vice versa. So I think forwarding the item to the full planning commission would be, for me, the best way to deal with the issue at this time.
I mean, I hate to have everybody go through, yet another, set of hearings and notices and all that stuff into a discussion of the fence.
It sounds like it's going to, though. It has
Yeah.
to.
Well,
No matter what.
I mean, my inclination is to see if we could have the directs. Mariah, can you put back your slide that says what it is that we need to be advising on?
Yes.
Good point.
Well, these are the discussion items, and then ultimately, these are the conditions. And staff's recommendation was to approve the fence with these conditions. I do know, I just want to add, since I don't think he can speak right now, but Jim, I believe he's estimated the cost for the fence, and it is pretty costly. as it's being proposed. And so I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. And if you have any questions or want to ask him anything, maybe he can come back on. But I think it is a pretty big financial expense. Whatever fence he chooses, such a long fence, but particularly this one was a couple tens of thousands.
Yeah, I would be interested in hearing from the applicant if either of the modifications we've discussed, either removing having a 6-foot fence and not having the spikes on top, or doing a 4-foot fence and having the sort of spikier look. If either of those would be comfortable, both of which are potentially lower in cost because it's less material in the fence.
Okay, can I invite the applicant to, okay, Jim, if you would please press *9 and raise your hand again, and we'll put you back on. There he is. Okay, and then, oh, there we go.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead. You have the floor.
Oh, well, I think that was the reason why I originally submitted the photo, because that's what I had a bid, and the bid was close to 15 to 16,000, including the sliding glass or sliding gate that would be solar powered. So it's quite a lot of money, and now to change it to a 4-foot fence, then a 4-foot fence would be something I could build, and then it changes the whole plan of doing the fence. So modifying it until it's basically I'm spending the same amount of money, but it's completely different than what I had a bid for. I would have to talk to the contractor that gave me the bid. I just it kind of the neighbor that called in that seemed quite upset. She said, I only have 2 instances on what was going on in the parking lot. I'm right next to a commercial parking lot. She's not, so she doesn't see all the stuff I see. So the fence itself, I mean, if I would have to see the pictures you guys were discussing, because without seeing the pictures, I really don't know what you guys were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that we had a consensus view. I mean, I like those ag style fences a little better, but I appreciate that my colleagues are both comfortable with the general style of fence that Mr. Mullen has proposed.
If I can say something, this all started a few years ago when I was talking to the chief of police, not the one that's there now, the previous one, and I was telling him, and he knew about all the stuff that was going on in the parking lot with the people and stuff, and he said, well, you need to buy a couple of German Shepherds. And I said, well, yeah, I'd love to do that, but unless I have the property fenced off, the dogs would be pretty much able to wander down the street. So German Shepherd can jump a 4-foot fence pretty easy. So, and this was the discussion I had with the chief of police a few years ago, 4 years ago.
And the other question that came up in our discussion for you, Mr. Mullen, was whether it would be possible to be acceptable to you to do the vents without the spikes on top.
That's a reasonable request.
Okay. Then let me bring it back to the committee for discussion. May not be. I'm sorry. Oh, Emily, are you? Wait, okay. Emily might not be with us right this second. Well,
No, I'm here.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
I was just hearing some extra sounds in the back and didn't know if that was you.
Mhm.
Okay, so it seems like if we can, if we were to be able to resolve this today, it would, they would, what about approving it without the design, with the conditions shown here, with the requirement that that it not have spikes on top,
Mhm.
and that the non-conforming wooden fence be modified to conformance
Yes.
in the method of the applicant's choice.
I don't, I think that at least my approach would be that if we're going to approve the 6-foot high fence along the street without the spikes, with the applicant acknowledging that removing the spikes was reasonable, that the side yard fence could be the same height as the front yard fence. I would be willing to make a motion to that effect.
And were you proposing that the side yard fence continue to be solid wood at that height?
Yes,
Would you be amenable to having at least, I'm concerned about the visual block of that high a fence between the properties that, that close to the street. Not so much for traffic reasons, but just because for neighborhood character reasons. And I think if you had some portion of that fence, I mean, I don't think it has to be 25 feet from the street that are 4 foot. I think we could be comfortable with it. With the new fencing extending for another probably 10 or 12 feet, as opposed to having that solid wood fence.
from the visit that I made, there are, again, the fence that I had mentioned at the corner. I looked, I don't know how much visual character for a neighborhood extends, but there are some fences in the new development area that have side yard fences that come up right to the back of the sidewalk at 5 or 6 feet in height in that area. That might be one example, or in those locations, and another example along El Centro. But there are scenarios within the area of the same side yard fences coming up to the back of the sidewalk or to the right of way within that neighborhood area. I mean, if we wanted to change the height of that fence, I would maybe even suggest, why don't we just say, let's put the wrought iron wire, take out the section of the fence that goes 25 feet back and put a wrought iron fence in. But I'm not supportive of that. I believe that the fences could be the same height. I think Mariah had explained to us before, visually, for sight distance, that the fence itself, both fences itself, are set back far from the travel way of the street. So again, they're not blocking sight distance of cars.
Right.
But which is different than what you had just mentioned about trying to be a little bit more compatible about having a lower height, of some distance along that side fence. But I'm not supportive of making the change. If we're going to allow it in one area, we should allow it in both areas.
But I think the concern is not just that it's at 6 feet, but it's that portion is not
Solid.
opaque as well. I kind of feel like if we're gonna make the exception for the fence proposed along the frontage, that any fencing within the frontage should follow the same rule.
And you would describe that rule being that any fence within the frontage be of the open character rather than the complete opaque character.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I could work with that. So that if you've got 6 feet, that wraps around the property, I could go with that. If this is, if that's acceptable to you, Dennis, it
Yes,
would.
It is acceptable, yes.
And let me ask staff, can we set this up so that if that is, a no-go for the applicant if it's cost prohibitive to the applicant after the applicant has had a chance to consider, what that would cost, if that's, a condition that's not workable, that rather than it having to come back to design review, or be a new action, that we could refer this to staff to resolve the disposition of that fence, or move it to planning if the current fence is, if doing the continuing the wrought iron open fencing at 6 feet is not acceptable to the applicant.
I think that you could do that. I think it puts us in a difficult position of having a decision made in a public setting, where neighbor expectations set, and then staff having to decide what is and what is not a financial burden. So I think we would prefer that it be a little bit more clear, either on the dollar amount that you're willing to have add to the project, that you would consider financially feasible for the applicant, or come up with or bring it back to DRC.
Let me ask another question. I know that for actions of the planning committee that are appealed to the city council, that appeal can be made by any planning commissioner or any city council member without charge, or by any member of the public with fee. Does the same apply to this?
Yes.
Okay, so that's our safety valve then. If it does, we'll approve it this way. If we vote to approve it, 3-0, that the fence, as I was just hearing that revised motion, right, so that the fence 6 feet, wrought iron in character, no spikes, and continuing on to the south, replacing the opaque non-conforming fence, so that it for the section for the 25 feet to the setback where 4 foot would ordinarily be required, that 6 foot will be allowed if it continues the wrought iron approach.
Yeah.
And then if that becomes unworkable, I'm certainly willing to appeal, have that appeal to the planning commission, or Commissioner Schmidt could do so because he sits on that body, and that would take care of, so that we might. I'm looking for a way to potentially resolve this in one action today without anybody having to go to a second meeting, but to allow for that to be done without charge.
Yeah, I think you could similarly write a condition that just brings it back to the DRC. If if that's financially infeasible for review and modification to the condition, which might be a little bit easier of a process than going to planning commission, although it's certainly at your discretion on which board you would want to send that to.
I'd like to say that, I'm very cognitive of expenses of things. On the other side of this issue, though, is the fact that the applicant knows that the requirement is 4 feet, and he has brought it forward to the commission, to the review committee, asking for 6 feet. And so in terms of what the overall expense is, he's already accepted the fact that this committee or the city council or the planning commission could say no fence at all over 4 feet. And so I really don't put into my discussion or my feelings, what the costs may be, because he knew up front that he had to get this approved for it to be built. So I think that we should be emphatic about what the condition is. And then, as the vice chair was speaking, is that if it needs to be appealed, and he can do that through one of us, or the neighbors could do that through one of us. So with that, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the exception for a 6-foot high fence in the style that the applicant has provided, with the exception of the spikes on the top of the fence. And then for that section of the side yard fence that's within the 25-foot setback, that a similar wrought iron type fence be placed in that location.
And does your motion also include the, Mariah, if you could put that language up, does the staff recommendation for a sliding gate?
Yes.
And that the new fences shall meet the site distance requirements as approved by the city engineer?
Yeah, and
we understand that that's probably fine,
with the conditions and recommendations by staff included into the motion, please.
And I just want to clarify, if the applicant chooses to cut down that side fence to 4 feet, could it be 4 feet wooden per the code?
Yes, that would be acceptable with me.
Okay, do we have a second for the motion?
Second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion needed?
I also just want to add real quick, if someone does choose to appeal the project, I believe that has to be done, Kelly, maybe correct me, within 14 days of today's date. So 2 weeks to actually appeal, and it has to be in writing, I believe.
Right, so anyone wishing to appeal that would need to contact Commissioner Schmidt or myself, who have the rights to make those appeals at no charge, with the information in writing. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay. Let's call the roll.
All right. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
committee member Baranek,
Yes.
vice chairperson Funk.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0. Thank you.
Okay. And I want to thank everybody for being here and being part of the discussion today. Okay, now let me come back to my agenda here. Oops, I just lost it. I believe that was our last action item. So our next thing is director's report. Sorry, I'm using the agenda online and I just lost it. It's on my second screen.
Yes, it's director's report.
Okay, thank you.
I'm thinking Kelly's going to do that.
Yeah, Kelly, would you care to?
But I hadn't thought about it. So I don't really know if we have anything of importance to report. There's a couple larger projects moving forward to Planning Commission in the next few months, which would be the Barrel Creek project we expect to resubmit shortly, as well as Del Rio Marketplace, which have come before this board before and will be moving forward for final approval. So those are some exciting projects up at Del Rio. La Plaza has also called for their final, so we expect them to be opening and occupied shortly. I know some of their Businesses are still working on their tenant improvements, but we're almost done with inspections on a couple of those as well. And then I know a lot of people in the community are excited about some of our changes for the ADU ordinance and SB9 ordinance moving forward. It's had a couple delays, but we are trying to get that on the Planning Commission and Council agendas for May. So be on the lookout for that.
Okay, and do you have any update on the property at Santa Barbara Road and El Camino Real, the commercial property there?
Sure. We've been in talks with the property owner who is trying to bring on a residential development partner to see if they can sort of split the costs and development potential of that site. If the podium level was quite expensive to try and have financed, and so they're looking at other options, but they are trying to keep within the character of what they submitted before. So we will likely be coming back to DRC for a check-in on that one because it's been a long time, and I know there was a lot of neighbor interest in that project, and so we want to be transparent about any changes that occur. But we are still hoping that they move forward with a mixed-use project for that site.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's lots of that, all of that work is keeping our planning and development staff very busy, I know, with that, but they're exciting things for our community. Okay, oops, there we go. Found the, and any, what I skipped over was committee member comments and reports. So do any of our, I'll circle back to that, do any of our, and Dennis or Emily, do you have any comments or reports that you would like to offer?
No comment.
Emily, I'm hearing.
No for me as well.
Okay. And I don't have anything further. I asked about the one project I was aware was being worked on that we didn't hear in the run. So we stand adjourned to the next meeting. Do we have what's our next tentatively scheduled meeting date?
So I believe I do have a small item on the next DRC date. Maybe Annette can clarify exactly what that is.
Yeah, so we have the Serena Court, I believe the cargo container on Thursday, April 28th for DRC.
Okay. We stand adjourned until Thursday, April 28th.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.